but definitely a few questions that I hope not too many people have asked. We won't be
Mm,
getting into your background as far as having grown up Mormon, because at this
mm.
point,
It's out
if
there.
people don't already know, they can go find out.
Mm,
And quite
yeah.
often, I've found that the kind of deconversion stories are less important
Mm,
than what a person has made of themselves afterwards.
mm, mhm,
And for that, is far more interesting in that way. And
mm,
you've gone down the path of a, and these are, of course, two terms that I never thought, or rather, rarely ever see put together. And
mm,
that is atheist spiritual director.
mhm.
So, right. I mean, I have an idea of what that would mean for me. But how does that work for you?
Yeah, it was language in this space is really tough, and there's just it's the language is just a minefield, and it's going to trigger and resonate with people based on your history with these words. And so it was really difficult when I was like post master's degree in theology doing my spiritual direction, and they kind of encourage us to like, what language do you want to put to this work of spiritual deconstruction and reconstruction. And for me, what really resonated with me is I'm super interested in everything that's been under the umbrella of spirituality. So that's
Mm.
awe and states of transcendence and wisdom and community building and ritual and meaning and purpose. I'm super interested in all of that stuff. And then I have this other word, which is atheist, which is and some people really think with that word it means that I'm sure that there is no God. For me, that's not how I learned what that word was. For me, that word just
Mm.
means that it's a negation. I'm just not a theist. I don't believe in an Abrahamic God. And so for me, what that phrase means is I really want to explore the good life and human thriving and even anything that has been a tool in religion or spirituality. I want to brush off all of the dogma around it, and the truth claims around it and the requirements of belief, and see what we're left with, because I think some of these tools are really helpful. They were certainly really helpful for me. So it's like I want to do all of that without having to force myself to believe in a God that I don't believe in.
Fair. Right. It strikes me a bit. I mean, in part of my own journey of figuring out and attempting to find community after had come across religious science, not to be confused with Scientology, two very
Hmm.
different
Or
things.
Christian Science.
And and it was one of the first things that really was going. Wait a minute, they call many of them will call themselves Christian, but having grown up fundamentalist Baptist largely, they were anything but. I mean, like,
Mm,
no. In fact, by some measures, in very conservative circles, they'd be absolute apostates, if not Satan in sheep's clothing kind of thing.
mhm,
And yet, at the same time, they embodied many of the qualities that of community and self-improvement and loving one another and helping one another basically be their best selves. That to me was exactly what I wanted and didn't
mm,
get
mm,
out of at least a brand of that kind of conservative fundamentalist absolutist
mm.
kind of thinking. So is that, so when you say atheist, not being part of that, okay, I just don't believe in an Abrahamic God. Like, the word can mean any number of things. So is that a little bit closer to what you're going
Yeah,
after as
and
far as like, hey,
and
fill it in
for
with whatever works?
yeah, and for atheism, because it's a negation, that really works for me because it doesn't require me to hold on to an ism. So if you've seen me on
Right.
social media, I've never claimed to be a materialist or an absurdist or an idealist or a dualist or what consciousness is. Like, all of this is really open-ended for me and a really great place to explore. But the reason that I can explore these spaces now without feeling any kind of anxiety or pressure to know what I have to believe is because I've really gathered so many tools and resources that now I can just freely explore these questions without having to know and without having to wrap my identity around it. So for me, yeah, atheism is really about, like, I just don't think it's that, but I'm open to what is, and in light of us not knowing what ultimate reality is, here are some tools and resources that seem to help. And for me, that was just a really pragmatic, approach to spirituality that allowed me to get tools for my life without, yeah, getting me locked into theological debates or trying to figure out which of the thousands of interpretations of Christianity is true, and getting lost in that space.
No, 100%. I think that's so in some of your work with, clients, some of the classes you developed, one of the things that I've encountered quite a lot in at least certain atheist circles, secular circles more broadly, is this almost weirdly inverted is the wrong word, but this framing of Christianity as being a singular thing. Like
Mm,
they often end up pulling the same kind of, well, to to be a real Christian, and then they recently actually stumbled across this in somebody's post, um, where it was like, if real Christians believe young Earth creationism, Bible centered this,
mm,
and
mm,
went down through in what was quite clearly an almost caricature. I mean,
right.
having grown up in some of those circles, I knew already there was like, no, that is to use their language, a remnant of a remnant of what, many of them who call themselves Christian believe. And yet, this was somebody who was vehemently positive as an informed, supposed, atheist that they knew better
Mhm.
what all of these labeled people, sought.
Yeah.
And that
You
seems to
really
be
yeah, you
exactly
nailed it.
contrary. Yeah.
Yeah, you really nailed it there. So the caricature on both sides is just not great. So atheists will caricature Christianity and really make it one-sided, and also do it in a way that's really naive to human nature and
Mhm.
um, the kinds of creatures that we are, the kinds of meaning-seeking creatures that we are. But then Christianity also really caricatured atheism. That really said, like, you
Right.
can't, as an atheist, you can't have morality, or like the reason the term atheism changed so much in the past 20 years that I've interacted with this term is because Christianity caricatured atheism as being sure that there is no God, which atheism never said about itself, right? And so Christians would just say, "Look how prideful could you be to look out in
Mhm.
the universe and know for sure that there is no God?" And so the caricature on both sides is just really unhealthy for the conversation and family relationships and everything. But to your point, like, I just did a video on this where we have a new study that showed that that swing that happens where you're a conservative Christian and you're sure that it's the truth, and then you swing
Mhm.
to an angry atheist who is sure that everybody else is ignorant or whatever. That tends to happen most with white like post evangelical straight men, and
Mhm.
queer people and women tend not to do that swing. So they tend not to swing in that direction. They tend to be more likely to explore spirituality, to call themselves agnostics rather than atheist. So there is something about it, it's very weird. And I call the atheist community out for this all the time, where it's like you're bringing some of your hierarchy and superiority and even
Mhm.
patriarchy that you were raised with, and you swung it over to atheism. And now it's just your new place to make fun of people and feel superior. It's your new identity. It's your new, you just made a lateral move here rather than
Yeah.
actually growing and developing as a person where you can make more space for different kinds of people. And yeah, so that's something that the atheist and secular community needs to be called out for more often, in my opinion, because it just isn't helping anyone.
No, hard to definitely agree. I mean, and that's at least for the last couple of years in particular. I think that's where and I think you alluded to it on there, and the bringing in the hierarchy, at least of a certain kind, a rigidity to things that have long been going. My issue isn't with religion. Whatever in the hell that even means, that's a whole
It's
other
a
thing.
really hard word to define. Yeah, the scholars of religion, like, can, like, really, really hard, like, the best definition they can come up with is it's how you orient yourself in the universe, and it's like, everybody does that. So,
Everybody
it's a
does it.
very, yeah, very hard word to define, and in that definition, everyone is religious, but I know people don't like to talk about it that
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean,
way.
getting into
You're
definitions
okay
can
with it,
be,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I don't, well, and that's where we go back into that meaning making. Like, if
Mm.
at core, and this is actually, I forget who I was having a conversation with about this, but where the irony of the secular community being supposedly pro science and yet often denying evolutionary psychology and our basic biology, as if, well, now we can just transcend this by being pure intellectuals. And in some
Which is not
ways,
scientific because, like, we are
right.
far more emotional, like, we like, if anything we know scientifically, it's that you emotionally feel something or experience something first, and then you add your rationality to it second.
Yep.
Like, we know that. That is solid science.
Yeah.
So it's
It's
so
affect first.
hypocritical. Oh, it's
Yeah.
so hypocritical of us. And there's been times, especially with men, like, like,
Mhm.
there's data on this. I'm not just picking on men here, but there's data on this where, like, I can show you all the science behind rituals.
Mhm.
Scientifically increases pleasure, decreases pain, marks values, processes emotions out of your body. I'll show you studies about rituals. And then if they were invited into something where they were going to do some kind of embodied ritual in order to process emotions out of your body, we're not believing in God, no woo woo, solid science.
Mhm.
They still can't do it. And if you can't do it, even though the science was there, then it's not actually about the science. It's about your
Mhm.
identity of I'm a rational robot and that makes me superior to everyone else. And it's like,
Right.
well, then the science actually never mattered to you. And so yeah, that's the place where we get a lot of hypocrisy in the
Mhm.
atheist community.
Well, and the, of course, added irony is that on the religious side, who often ostensibly are against particularly evolution, they're often using principles out of it in a better way
Mm.
in practice. I mean, pointing this out, depending on who you talk with, you're going to be looked at like, what? No, we're just, doing what works. But, the community engagement, the rituals themselves, the deep need of focusing on the family as a coherent unit. Obviously, we can have conversations about what that looks like in practice, but we still need that interconnection and that foundational support structure, however which way it may need. We're not just individual billiard balls bouncing around.
Mm.
We need to hopefully not kill the metaphor. We need the table. we need the rest of the balls. We need everything else to play this
And this is, yeah, this
crazy
is where
game.
atheism goes to the next level where, like, I think the naive stages is when you use it either as a security blanket or a way to feel better about
Mm,
people, or you're just processing your anger or whatever it is. But where atheism kind of makes a move is when you see, oh, religion is a cognitive technology that we created. We created it for a reason because there are aspects of human well-being that we maybe even subconsciously have created with religion for the purpose of human well-being, and we have co-evolved with religion for a reason. And so if you throw it all away, okay, that, like, we can talk about that, but there are some foundational things that we will be missing that opens us up, for example, to the meaning crisis if you
mhm,
just throw away a cognitive technology that we co-evolved with for at least 100,000 years, if not more. And so, yeah, that's when atheism starts to get more humble and stops just like making fun of Christians for, like, dumb things that they think Christians say, to where you go to, okay, what is it about this cognitive technology that we need to bring into my individual life, my family, my community, or else
Mhm.
we lose things that actually lower human well-being. Because if you're leaving religion and human well-being gets worse, then you're stuck with the tough atheist question. This is the question that is discussed in atheist circles as a really difficult question, which is, uh, what is more important to you, truth or well-being? And if
Mhm.
well-being goes down, then actually why are you valuing truth? And that's a difficult question for atheists to grapple with. And so we have to work with this a little bit more of just like, why is this a cognitive technology? What is here worth saving and salvaging, even as we're deconstructing from certain aspects of religion? And so for me, like as a spiritual director, it feels like I'm helping people out of this building that's on fire, in Christian nationalism, but it also feels like there's a cliff ahead of meaning crisis and nihilism and breakdown of community, and all kinds of things happening with Gen Z, increase in anxiety and depression.
Mhm.
And there's got to be a place in between where we can try to grab onto some of these tools without forcing us to, believe in gods that maybe should have died a long time ago.
Right. Well, it's interesting you bring up then the meaning crisis, particularly Gen Z. It's I've been working in mental health for closing in on 20 years. And one of the criticisms within is this tendency to pathologize all of just normal human behavior. And so there's at least a question around, has pathology increased? So have actual diagnoses as a thing increase themselves, or have we expanded? And I wonder at times if, quite often actually, if the two are related. It's, you get rid of this guiding, technology, as you put it, a religion as a structure for meaning and purpose and societal structuring, and what comes next? Well,
Hmm.
the vagary, the at least the new priesthood of science, which in my mind is very much tied to, well, therapists in general.
Hmm.
We have learned to now say, well, it's not sin, it's an anxiety disorder.
Hmm.
It's, why did I do the things I did? Well, because of this trauma, thing that we have poorly defined. And now I can explain literally everything. And so when it comes to tools, and you've gone on a lot of trips. In fact, you just recently got back from a trip from Japan, correct?
Hmm. Yeah. Hmm.
Oh, man, how. So I'm totally going to go on a tangent with
Yeah.
that because it's
Okay.
one of the
Let me.
places.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have
yeah,
a note because I write things
yeah.
down while you're
Mhm.
talking so that I don't miss it. So let me talk about
Sure.
what you just said because I think it's
Yeah,
important,
yeah,
and then I'd love to
yeah.
talk to you about Japan.
Sure.
The example that comes to mind as you're talking, because I think you're bringing up a really good point, is something like for teens a rite of passage, which we see
Mm,
across the board in all cultures and religions, going as far back as we have any kind of history. That there's rites of passage from going from a child to sometimes just a young adult to adult, but even just young adult to adult, and that this is done in community and there's some kind of embodied ritual going on. Sometimes there's a way for the teen to like push a boundary and do some kind of challenge, and whatever it is, there's some kind of rite of passage. And I think what we did too quickly is we looked at how we did this, and how we do these things is through stories. We are
mm,
storytellers. We are narrative based creatures. And so we looked at these rites of passage, especially with like colonialism, and just said like, look how primitive that they're doing this little like dance and this little thing, and they're wearing this, and like, oh god, it's so primitive. And what we didn't realize is, oh my god, this was a cognitive technology that we now have evidence, especially from evolutionary psychology, showing that when the brain is changing in puberty, and you just kind of feel ungrounded as a teenager,
mhm,
and like your brain is transitioning. We created this cognitive technology through story to help the brain transition from, I'm moving away from this and I'm moving into this. I'm not this child now, I'm an adult now, or I'm a young adult now, whatever it is. And so the problem that we have sometimes is in secularism is all we look at is the story, and the story is superstitious, or the story is
Mm.
like maybe even it's like totally bullshit or whatever it is. But we don't realize that, oh, there was like a long cognitive technology that was helpful for teen brains. And now teens who are just kind of traveling through teenage and don't have any rites of passage, don't have a community, don't have any way to mark time, their brains struggle more. And so it's like, oh, there was something there that we missed when we just saw this as superstitious and threw it away. And to go to your point about therapy, the gap that we have is like therapists can work with, like I've worked with therapy. Neither you or I are like dogging therapy and saying that nobody should ever go to therapy.
No.
There's a place for it, but a
Hmm.
therapist is not going to craft you a rite of passage for your child and a community to kind of hold that ritual. That's not what therapists do. That's if like some of that is even like outside their ethical guidelines of what they're even allowed to do. And so that's the gap there that we're missing, that
Hmm.
people like me, spiritual directors, are filling, of like therapists can't touch this space. It's a little bit too spiritual, and there's ethical guidelines that keep therapists from going into that space with other people. But religion's not doing it for you because you left religion. Secular's not doing it for you because we just haven't built these things up in secularism. We're spending most of our time just, saying why religion is stupid. And that's the gap that we're experiencing. And that's just for
Hmm.
rite of passage. That's not for all the other things that religion was doing. Okay. Japan. Or do you have a comment there? And then I'll
Yeah,
go to
no,
Japan
no,
when you're
that's
ready.
because
But
that's a
yeah.
real good. Um, we'll probably shelve that one for them for a little bit, the Japan thing. So, because there's something about particularly the rites of passage as almost, and it came to mind almost like a funneling, project where the amount of information that uh, everybody, for that matter, has. And one could almost look at, some of these worldviews as algorithms created by a society to help go, look, there's a million pieces of information here. Here's the 10,000 you need to pay attention to,
Mm,
particularly when your brain's going like this. And now we almost are to the inverse where you're like, don't worry about the 10,000 you should have access to, and you should be wrestling with the million. And then we wonder why the overwhelm happens when there isn't any means of, uh, you know, societal structuring. Instead,
yeah.
it's just like
Anchoring.
you make it up
Yeah.
yourself.
Right. And
You
that's
know,
overwhelming. Yeah. Like how
absolutely.
for Gen Z, and I think about this a lot because I have 4 children. For
Mm.
Gen Z, it's like they've been raised on more information. They see more stories in a day than like most humans experience in a lifetime, right? They have so much information, so many paths that seem available, right? Like people are doing all kinds of things, have all kinds of beliefs, have found their way doing all kinds of stuff. And so it's so much information. And then at the same time, they have less of a nest period than any other generation in history. Every single generation in history had a community that you were born into, had a narrative, had some
Mm.
rituals, had some way to participate in this community. And it was small. It was a nest period for you to build identity and safety and belonging and things that you needed in childhood to be safe enough to psychologically, continue in your development. So for Gen Z, it's like they have more information and more input than any other generation, but also less resources because as their millennial parents like me left religion, but didn't really replace it with much, they didn't get that identity, that belonging, that security. And then when we look and see like, why aren't they leaving the house when they're 18? And it's like they didn't get the resources that every other generation in history got. And they're also have so much pressure, and are aware of so many more problems than any human generation ever has. Of course they're anxious. Like of course,
Mhm.
like they don't want to
They
leave the
should
house.
be.
You know,
Yeah.
like it's overwhelming. And so what people
Mhm.
don't realize is like, yeah, I'm an atheist and people can have feelings about it, but if you look at my life, because I know the science of spirituality and because I got had, the opportunity to dig in this, I do like my family, we say something before we eat. It's not a prayer,
Mm.
but we have a line that we say. Every Sunday morning, we read and I do a little moral lesson and we go out in nature and we play family games. We have a structured like family church. And so when you look at my life with the rituals that you have, an intentional community that I created with either school community or Girl Scouts or karate, what you would see is like I'm trying to actually replace everything that I had as a child that was good about
Mhm.
religion without giving them, as an ex-Mormon, without giving my kids with brown skin the racism that came with it or, the stuff that came with it. And so it's like, yeah, I'm an atheist, but like I'm doing Sunday church. I'm saying something before we eat. I'm doing Sunday dinner because statistically, those things are really good for kids. It's really good for you. And so
Mhm.
that's why I really love secular spirituality, why it helped me so much is I got to bypass that belief question and just go into like how can I integrate these tools so that especially my kids who are going to be Gen Z don't pay a harsh cost for the fact that I left Mormonism, which
Mhm.
was a functional community. It has issues, the beliefs are crazy, but I live in Boise, Idaho. Like it was a community. It did
Mhm.
have that. And so I want to rescue all those good things.
No, 100%. When I love oh my gosh, the way you talked about what you do with your family and the familial rituals that you've got down. I mean, it's exactly what all my clients, talking about like having check-ins, having a formal process of working through and going, here's how we talk about, our feelings of the week and the struggles that we're having so that it's not so open-ended that literally anything flies. Like some
Mhm.
things do work better than
Mhm.
others.
And especially for children, because I think that's the
Mhm.
piece that's really hard for my generation is like I was raised in Mormonism, a lot of order and structure, super delayed adolescence for me, And so for me, being 40 and having a lot of freedom can be really great because like I'm not going to be a heroin addict. And like I can explore these things and because I had a lot of order and structure in childhood, I can be okay with a lot more freedom and nuanced and gray area now in my 40s. But what's really hard for my generation, Gen X and millennials, is to then go back for our kids and try to give them the order and
Mhm.
structure that is most appropriate for kids when we're in a place of just like everything is gray, right? Like the hard thing, it was really hard for me at first until I looked into the science of like I like stories like most adults where like the
Mm.
heroes have flaws or the villains, have a story for how they got there. But for someone who's 5, it's actually best for them if the bad guys are just bad and good guys are just
Mhm.
good. That's actually the most developmentally appropriate. And so all of that was like really eye-opening for me of just like, oh, I can't in my 40s just expect Gen Z to be where I am with none of the resources um, that I had in childhood that they now don't have.
Right. Well, and that's one. I love the connection of the development. I mean, how many parents have either of us, even ourselves, when we working with kids, and you kind of go, it's difficult to step away from. Well, I think this way. I mean, I ask these questions, and the number of times I've had to go, but they're 5.
Mm,
Like,
mhm.
that it's not rigidity. Rigidity comes later when you have the capacity to have flexibility and avoid it. A 5-year-old isn't rigid. A 5-year-old has a limited capacity. It doesn't make them
Yeah, and
stupid.
has
It
and has
doesn't.
boundaries for, like,
Right.
psychological health. They need boundaries, they
Right.
need walls,
Yep.
and that can be really hard for us to do if we came from, like, for me, a high demand religion where, like, giving my
Right.
kids walls and boundaries is sometimes hard because I'm out here like doing mushrooms outside of the matrix and then I got to come back and tell my
Right.
kids like, "Hey, you need to get good grades." And like, "Oh my god, the whiplash." And that can be difficult. That can be really difficult, but
Hmm.
I think working with those things as a parent can hopefully help the next generation not just leave religion. And yeah, I hopefully save my kids from some harm, but I also want to not cause them harm by things that I took
Hmm.
away that could have been developmentally helpful. That's really the goal.
Right. Well, and because we're going to look for it anyway. I mean,
Sure.
that's just it. We're going to go look for whatever provides a structure, a means of predicting and making things make sense.
Hmm.
And even if it's incoherent from a critical perspective, doesn't really matter
That's how our brains
because our
work.
brains don't
Brains
care.
are pattern seeking, meaning
Right.
making
Yeah.
machines. That's what they do. Like you can't get outside of that. Sorry, like that's what brains do.
Yeah. They're not interested in truth. They don't even know what that means.
Mm,
It's pure functionality.
mm,
Like, it's kind of going, did A follow and B follow from A? Great. Let's keep going.
mm.
Let's do it again. And so,
Yeah, that's actually a really
yeah.
deep question. Like that opens up a whole again, this is about inviting some humility into atheist spaces. But that question of like, if we are just an evolutionary species and we evolved not for truth, but for survival, then actually
Mhm.
what scientific grounds do you have to trust rationality? And that's like the snake that eats its own tail in atheist spaces.
Mhm.
That's a tough question. That's a tough question.
Well, you're right. Well, and this is where you get into that weird, uh, the positivism, uh, Cartesian dualism, where it's just like almost as if evolution works from the neck down.
Mm,
And everything above that, well, and within certain Christian circles, it was the Mago Dei, the God's image was the intellect, and it's almost as if in many ways people have left the mythology piece and substituted it. They wanted
yeah.
to have their cake and eat it too.
Like the wiring is all still there.
Right, the
Yeah.
wiring is still there. Like, we're
Hmm.
still full of it. We're just making
Yeah.
shit up all the time, and that's okay. I mean,
Mm,
and this goes into a little bit, I think, of now I know you've used the term nihilist,
mhm,
on more than one occasion,
mhm,
and there's the caricature of it that is
mhm.
this, like, somber, nothing
Angsty,
matters.
yeah.
Right.
Angsty
Uh
slash sometimes suicidal.
Right. Yes. That is, well, one, it's not accurate, but two, obviously that's not how you're using it.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
where does that
we
go
can
with
talk
you?
about yeah, so nihilism just as an ism
Uh-huh.
is the belief that there's no inherent meaning in the universe, and what
Mm,
people sometimes hear out of that is again, like this positive statement that I know that there's no meaning. That's not what
mm,
I'm saying. It's just that there seems to be, according to just me looking around here, and like, I was a history teacher before I did this. I've been looking around. It seems like the universe doesn't give you um a meaning that we can seem to all agree on here. It seems to be
mm,
pretty vague. So nihilism is just the belief. I don't think that the universe has any inherent meaning, at least one that we are capable of discovering as humans. And so, in lieu of that, people can create meaning. And that's where we separate from pessimistic nihilism and optimistic nihilism. And certain
mm,
personality types do better in one or the other, or gravitate to one or the other. So, I have had time as a pessimistic nihilist where there's no inherent meaning in the universe, and I am suffering and I don't have enough meaning to justify or to be able to have a container for the suffering. And then you get to the point of pessimistic nihilism where it's like, it's just better that you're not born. Maybe
mm,
it's even better if I kill myself. Maybe it's even more ethical to kill myself. That's where pessimistic nihilism can go, where there's no meaning in the universe. Plus, I'm suffering. There's no meaning. Like, let's check out of this. Like, this is awful. Whatever this is awful. Now, optimistic nihilists have a different response. They say, okay, there's no inherent meaning in the universe. That means that I am free to create that. And so, optimistic nihilists usually have a high core value of freedom. They usually
Right.
are low in neuroticism, high in extroversion, whereas I'm the opposite. I'm higher in introversion and high in neuroticism. So, we just suffer more by nature. And so optimistic nihilists, I almost never see as clients because they just don't need me. Like, oh,
Mhm.
life is a canvas. Fantastic. Get me a paintbrush. I'm going to paint what I want. And this is amazing. And I can just create an authentic life that's worth experiencing. And that's great. So in my work, I would help pessimistic nihilists become optimistic nihilists. And I don't do that by changing their beliefs. They're still nihilists.
Mhm.
It's just how you approach that and how you're responding to the universe not giving you a map of meaning.
Right. That seems so. I think it's interesting coming across that because I think my version of more positive nihilism, I just went to the absurdist route. You know,
Mm,
encountered Camus and just went, you know what? We're just making stuff up and throwing it on the walls, and if it sticks, we call it art.
mm,
And how amusing is it that, and to kind of tie in a little bit, I think, to that inherent seeming desire to keep what we would like from a kind of mythological past and without going, but we're still making it up. We want to acknowledge that. And that's a
mm,
little bit of where let's acknowledge it. And now, and I think this may be a little bit then what your work is kind of going, let's acknowledge it and see what we can do with it. What
mm.
can
Yeah,
you do with it? It doesn't have to
yeah.
be this.
The analogy that I use that says the same thing that you just said is like some people will feel in this very Truman moment of,
Mm,
existential crisis that the universe has no meaning and, what's the point of any of this? I had a thought there, sorry. What Go back, sorry, go back to I lost it. Go back to what you were saying, it'll come back to me.
so the idea that you're still the one making it up.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
And yeah,
See,
there we
I
are.
got it, I got it,
Okay.
okay. Yeah, I lost it. I started thinking about The Truman Show and um I lost it. So the analogy that I've used is like people will feel like they're in a video game that like
Mm,
I'm just a character in this game. I don't know why I'm here. And then eventually like my game character dies and like the self is an illusion and we don't have free will and they'll kind of feel dissociated like a video game character. And it's a common analogy that people will use when they have some dissociation going on
mhm,
with an existential crisis. And just like what you were saying, absurdism just kind of accepts that. It just kind of navigates that gap and says like, yeah, this is absurd. This is a weird fucking game. We could be Sims on an alien computer. We don't know what the hell is going on. Okay. Like what
mhm,
kind of levels do you want to play in this game? Like
right.
what do you want to? And then you start creating like the video game of life that you just want to play for the sake of experience. And then when it's time to go, it's time to go and you just kind of let go of it.
Yep.
And and so yeah, that can be really helpful for people. I think the most helpful thing about absurdism is just there's something really emotionally validating about Camus when you're in an existential crisis that he'll just say it out loud because we have a lot of limitations for this language because we don't want to trigger people with suicidality. But it's just kind
Mhm,
of emotionally validating to read someone who says like, should I kill myself or have a cup of coffee? And he says like the first question of philosophy is like, do you consent to be here? And when you're in that
mhm,
place where you're seriously thinking about life, just having someone say that out loud is just so emotionally validating for people. Now, the only thing that I would add to absurdism is in my
mm,
experience, people do really well in absurdism at the beginning. It's very emotionally validating. It gives them a lot of freedom. It gives them a lot of space. It kind of like puts the pressure off to like figure things out. And they do great in that for a while. But in my experience, like have a lot of suffering or trouble in your life and you're like, "Oh, myth of Sisyphus." I actually have him on my wall right here.
Hmm.
Just find a rock to push up the hill and you'll find yourself happy. Well, some people are pushing up some rocks and they're not very happy, right? And so
No. Yeah.
absurdism does have some gaps. Like most
Hmm.
in philosophy, a lot of times it's not really considered like a complete and balanced breakfast, that you may need to add other things, because if the
Hmm.
only tool that you have is just like rebel, then it's like, well, like, how do I raise kids? Or like,
Right.
like absurdism is great, but Camus got to just like travel the world and write, and he had money and he had maids and he had mistresses. Like, yeah, he probably had a
Yeah.
great time in absurdism, but like not everybody has a great time. So in my work, I often see people move from absurdism into existentialism, which just
Hmm.
has a little bit more meat to it to give you tools if you feel like pushing that rock up a hill isn't doing enough for you. So I also see that too.
Right there with you. No, I think
Mm.
it's that for me, it's almost like a balancing part between the two of going, never losing sight of the fact that we are just playing this game
Mhm.
while at the same time recognizing that sometimes the levels are fucking hard.
Yeah. Mhm.
And it's okay to acknowledge the difficulty and go, I need something more than merely laughter. And
Mm.
that's where we get into core values.
Hmm.
What are you giving? I work with a lot of first responders. What are you who are faced with the
Mm.
end of so
Mm.
much in varying ways in people's lives, and having to answer that question of, well, what am I doing showing up here? I can't just
Mm.
laugh. Certainly not
Yeah.
in some
Or like,
circumstances.
yeah, in that situation, rebel against the absurd. It's like, okay, but like I just picked up a kid
Yeah,
who died. Like,
right.
uh, uh.
Yeah. This only takes me so far.
Mhm.
And and then and I think then it's then that thing of not getting caught up in going, okay, I'm gonna do it. And I might always have, and there's that tension in existentialism where you always have that sense of this doesn't solve everything. And there's where the acknowledgement comes in. It's like, no, it doesn't. And that's okay.
Mhm.
But we're
Mhm.
trying. And
Mhm.
that's the struggle is part of that process of that. Now we're coming back to that meaning making. The
Mhm.
struggle is, was it interview with Paul Bloom recently that reminded me of learning requires fiction or friction rather.
Mm.
Learning requires that a bit of struggle to go, this didn't work before, this does. Oh, that tension
Yeah.
point allowed us to go,
I mean,
I
some
think
of
I
that
can
for
apply
me,
this.
like, I wouldn't even use the word struggle. I would take it a step
Mm,
further. Like, there were things that I learned that caused like a little death in me. Like, something in me died
yeah.
upon learning that thing. And like, that's hard.
Hmm.
It's hard. But
Hmm.
going back to what you said of like holding how hard life is. Like, this is what we see from psychology and existentialism. We have like the Stockdale paradox of, people who are prisoners of war and like what are the ones that actually best survived Holocaust prisoner of war situations. And it's one that like they had this paradox that they didn't sugarcoat what was happening. Like, this sucks. And
Hmm.
also, just a lot of like meaning making. I choose to show up according to my core values, no
Hmm.
matter what happens. Or I know that I'm going to survive this and this isn't the end of my story, whatever it is. And it was that ability to hold both, to be big enough to hold both at the same time, that this is awful. And also, I'm choosing how I respond to this. And that tended to give people even an extraordinarily, like, there's no client I've ever had, and I've heard some sob stories, but there's no client I've ever had who has a worse life than a concentration camp
Hmm.
person, right? Like, you have more freedom than that. And so when you look at like how did those people survive, they knew what the world was. They were experiencing the worst of what human nature is. And the ones who
Right.
said, I'm gonna make someone laugh every day are the ones that survived, right? And the ones who had too much optimism where reality just like knocks it down
Hmm.
really struggled. Like, I'm gonna be out by Christmas, and then Christmas comes, they don't get out. They really struggle because their their optimism isn't matching reality. You need some more reality here. But
Hmm.
the ones who could hold reality and also hold on to their authenticity and choose the way that they want to respond, were the ones that not only survived, but had less PTSD when they did survive
Yeah. Wow.
and made the world better, and made the world better by choosing how to respond to the worst of what humans do.
Well, it was strength out of they seemingly didn't lose sight of the fact that they knew they were making this up. And so let's put our best foot forward. We
Mhm.
can't rely on the structure itself.
Mm.
It's this again in these conversations around like rights and
Yeah.
and acknowledging that nobody has a right to anything. We're literally making these up. Like they
Right.
weren't bestowed upon God, certainly, and they weren't bestowed. You, even the terminology, if they were given to you, then they are in fact not intrinsic. And
Right.
now we get back
Mhm.
to the nihilism and that recognition of,
Totally. This is exactly a place that nihilists get stuck, where I see them get stuck, where they kind of lay on the couch and wait for the structure to fix itself. Like,
mhm,
why can't we just live in communities where we do art for four
right,
hours a day and we just, and it's like, that's great. If you're going to wait for that, ooh, that's not going to be great for you.
mm,
And so, I see a lot of nihilists who, like the catalyst that nihilism can be is it can force you to be really honest
mhm,
about what a life worth experiencing looks like for you. And so if you can get to the catalyst part of nihilism, it can actually really explode into really being like so thoughtfully intentional about what you want to experience in your life, so that even if you said to someone who's in that place, hey, you're going to die in a year because you have cancer or whatever, they wouldn't change anything because
mhm,
they've already decided, like, this is how I want to live my life as long as I live it. And too many nihilists sometimes, and especially when depression is mixed with it, just kind of wait, because as social creatures, we don't like to push against the norms. And so we wait for the structure to fix itself, and it's not going to. And so
no,
that's why it has given me a lot of emotional resilience living in Boise, Idaho. I'm around
mm,
a lot of Mormons and MAGA people and all kinds of issues, and we're having a lot of issues with our state with gay rights and trans rights and all these things. And like some of my clients are like really, really spiraling. And I think one of the reasons that I don't spiral as bad as I used to, because I used to really spiral about suffering and anything that I saw that was suffering. And it's because I've already chosen how to respond. Like I'm already
mm,
laser focused on how I'm responding to what life appears to be. And so, like, it's not that suffering doesn't matter, it always matters to me, I feel it very deeply, but it's more so that, like, some new information about some new area of suffering doesn't send me to spiral, because I know how I'm responding to this and responding the best way that I can as a finite creature. I know the ways that I try to reduce suffering, I know the ways that I'm trying to fight against authoritarianism, I know the ways that I'm trying to um yeah, like reduce suffering in myself and others, and that just can give you a lot of emotional resilience so that you're not dependent on the world around you changing in order to be happy or find meaning. My response is
mhm,
like, even if I knew that religion wins, fundamentalism wins, and then the earth blows up and no one knows that we're here, even if I could know that for sure, I would still do what I'm doing, right? Because
right.
it's still valuable for me, it's still a life worth living for me, even if that's the end result. And that has given me more emotional resilience and nihilism than like almost anything else.
No, well said. It reminds me of when I talk with clients around goals. And one of the points that I make is that if a goal is contingent upon another person doing something,
Mm,
then it's no longer about you.
mm. Yeah,
And
that's good.
and that will often then generate behaviors of either one when you find out that you can't force somebody. Either one, you're going to lose sight of what was important because it was never about you to begin with. Or
Mm,
two, you'll go down paths of quite awful behavior to
yeah.
attempt to force an
Yeah,
outcome.
some like ends justify the means
Hmm.
behaviors. Mhm.
Yep.
Mhm.
Hence the, not really even against a lot of these different structures. One against is authoritarianism, that
Mm,
innate drive or proclivity that we have to say, the world didn't show up the way I want it. So now I'm going to try to make it so.
Mm.
And instead step back and go, but the only person that I can really do anything about is me. So how am I showing up in the face of this?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah,
Even if
that
everything,
was a big shift.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So with that, like picking up from before around, so Zen Buddhism, you went
Hmm.
to top two places that I want to go. And
What's the
this is
other
my
one?
bucket list. Scotland.
Oh,
I
okay.
very
Yeah.
much want to
Mhm.
do a full on hiking trip through the Highlands,
Mm.
like a full 7, 10 day
Yeah.
out. Jeez,
Mm.
heck yeah.
I hope you
So
do.
I,
I've never been, but yeah, I hope you do
yeah,
it. That sounds lovely.
it's right there. And so it's on the list. I need to finish on my doctorate, then that's going to be my gift. But
Mm.
you know the so what drew you to visiting? What was involved in the trip?
Yeah,
Because you were there for a
to be
while.
totally yeah, to be totally honest, my husband went on a Mormon mission there. He's also
Huh.
no longer Mormon. So he speaks Japanese and hadn't, been back to Japan since his time there as a little Mormon boy. And so I was like, "Hey, you want to go?" He's always wanted to go back since he speaks the language really well. And I'm like, "Yeah, there's some temples I really want to go to. Like this is kind of a win-win." So we spent 3 weeks there, and I really thought at the beginning that I would be spending more time in there's so many differences in Buddhism, and as a Western person and studying Christian theology, like, I'm still learning how
Mhm.
you get all the different kinds of Buddhism and how they mix with, in different cultures and countries. So I thought that that was kind of what I was gonna be doing in Japan is really just immersing myself in, different aspects of Buddhism and specifically, how Buddhism mixed with Shinto in Japan and gave it its unique kind of forms of Buddhism. But really, I found myself not really being drawn to the Buddhism so much, and some of that is maybe just because 'cause I've studied a lot of it before, and
Mhm.
I found myself just absolutely um, in awe of Shinto, and I just
Mhm.
really dove deep into Shinto, and this actually the reason I wanna tell you about this is because it goes right into our discussion. There is, a temple called I don't know how to say it in Japanese, but it's like the Shrine of a Thousand Gates. It's that picture where you see a bunch of, like, red arches and you can walk through it,
Mhm.
and I was walking through it, it's a very beautiful Shinto shrine, and I was just weeping.
Mhm.
I was really crying, I was really emotional, like, it hit a wound that I didn't quite like, "Ooh, like, I'm crying more than, like, I thought I'd be crying through here, like, what's going on with me? I'm triggered by something, obviously."
Yeah.
And what really hit me is the thing that I think we miss out on the West is because I'm no longer Mormon and I don't have those beliefs, I lost 100% access to, rituals for my kids. My youngest kid
Mhm.
just turned 8. Usually we would do a big ritual with their baptism. I can't do that. So I lost my community and my identity and family rituals and so much I lost so much by just changing what I believed about God, right? Like I lost a lot and it was really ungrounding for me. And what I loved about Shinto is because some of these Eastern religions or indigenous religions are not based on faith that something is true,
Mhm.
then you can participate in it no matter what you believe. And that was so beautiful for me, but also painful for me because as you're walking through these arches, you just have generations of families who write down their hopes and dreams for their families. You have rituals that these families have been doing for thousands of years. You have places that are sacred that your grandma and great grandma and great great grandma have returned to. You have certain holidays that everyone can participate in. And because it's not built on belief specifically the way we do in the West, where like you just have to pass through this faith belief door in order to access it. It meant that, anyone from, that area or that family or that lineage or that tradition could participate really no matter what you believe about the world, whatever your metaphysical beliefs are. And that's so different to how we set it up in the West, where it's like, you can have these things if you believe XYZ is true.
Right.
that it really just kind of it really showed me how much longing I still have for how much I miss in being in Boise, Idaho, and being an atheist and on both sides of my Mormon family, really, like, I have siblings who think that I'm doing the work of Satan. That's some of that is still really painful for me. But because some of these Eastern religions didn't build on faith in the same way, it allowed people to continue to participate in it even if beliefs change. And I didn't realize how beautiful that was and how painful it is for me to be experiencing otherwise until I was kind of walking through that and experiencing that.
Yeah. There
So
was
I
a
hope you
moment
go. It
there.
was lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that, yeah. When it seems like there's that holding the space for the contradiction, holding the space for, you don't have to believe X, Y, and Z completely. You don't have to check these boxes in order to participate in the meaning making that societally we're doing together. And in the kind of partisanship of everything here, it's, labels aren't used as a start of a conversation. They're used to end them.
Mm,
Like, I don't need to know anything more about you than what
right.
bumper sticker you've put on your forehead, kind of thing.
Yeah. All you can do
And
is like, I've seen one that's like, all you have to do is wear a sweater that says like, I support public libraries. And then it's like, oh, I
right.
know everything about you and like, fuck
Yep.
that person. You know what I mean? Like, wow, like I was just saying I like libraries. It's like,
Right.
yeah. But
No,
yeah, everything's loaded
100%.
like that. But what I
Yep.
liked about Shinto, it was really about relationship. Like, what is your relationship to yourself and your relationship
Mhm.
to the land and your relationship to this sacred place and your relationship to your family and your community? And because it's relational, it just was really embodied and really beautiful, and just brought up some wounds that I still have,
Yeah.
because the faith tradition that I come from, was less about relationship and more about beliefs.
Well, and from what I remember around Shinto is also an appreciation for, and tying this back to something you mentioned a while back around that appreciation for having a part of you die.
Hmm.
Like, it's not just melodrama. There might be a little bit on occasion, but it doesn't change some kernel of truth there of going, that part of you is no more. It's the freedom of not having a transcendental self. It's our self is just it's a perspectival,
Hmm.
take. It's just kind of going, here I am, and who I was 20 minutes ago is different than who I am now and will be, 20 minutes from now. And to appreciate and almost have an internal mini ritual for the passing of the person you no longer are. Just it's
Hmm.
always struck me as a kind of there is a freedom there to be had and an appreciation for what are we going to do next and what are we
Hmm.
doing together for that.
And I think that's an important part of the grieving process of deconstruction,
Yeah.
because there's anger and then there's freedom, and it's like, for Mormons it's like, oh, I can have a cup of coffee, this is fun, like let's see what all these people have been on about with the coffee. And but after a while, like, there is some grief there, and there's parts of you that have
Mhm.
died. And so some things that I have done as a spiritual director is, will kind of plan a funeral for the part of you that
Mhm.
died, or sometimes for people, the part of you that never got to be, like, especially for women who wake up in a deconstruction and they have 5 kids and never had a job and never had an opportunity. Okay, there was a part of you that never got to experience being a teenager, and, being a young adult and some of these things. And so we'll have a funeral for the you that never got to live, right? Who
Mhm.
died before she had a chance. And then, at the end, you would make promises like, from now on, I promise, this to myself. And it could be really beautiful. Or I've designed funerals
Mm.
for like God, like if God was a parent figure, or God was like an attachment. And we have all kinds of
Mm.
rituals for if your dad dies. But when your eternal dad dies, who is, like, better maybe than your earthly dad, we have, like, no way to process that. So sometimes
Mhm.
I'll even, work with someone to, like, I'll be a witness to the funeral of the part of them that died or never got to live, or the god that died, because it does help us to process the grief there. That's why we developed rituals around death, is because it does help us process. But we don't have any of that, in the spiritual space, because you're either doing the rituals in religion, or you're in the secular space where we're really wary of these rituals, and like, what do you mean
Mhm.
you have a funeral for God? Like, there is no God. And it's like there's a space in between those two stances that has been the most beautiful place for me personally to hang out. That's the space that I like.
Wow, right there with you. When it seems as if there's a recognition, like 2 steps. One, recognizing that it was an illusion, but at the same time, just because you recognize, like free will, just because you recognize it's an illusion doesn't mean
Mhm.
that you've given up on the weight, the emotional power
Mhm.
of what that belief and what that did for you. And that's what I find with a lot of certain people who work with religious trauma in particular, is that they almost want to go, well, move on, and you have to recreate everything. And it's like, well, no, you don't have to recreate everything. It's about recognizing that you were trying, given the spaces you had, and you're still in the same journey.
Mhm. Yeah, that through line is
Now,
really important. Yeah,
yeah.
of, like, finding that through line. But yeah, it reminds me of my favorite quote from Harry Potter, which is like Harry Potter asked Dumbledore at the end, "Is this real or is this happening in my head?" And Dumbledore says, like, he says something like, "Why can't it be real even if it's just happening in your head?" And I was like, "Oh,
Hmm.
that's a great little line for a children's book. That's fantastic. I love that."
Uh-huh. Yep. Yep.
So,
Well,
even
that's
if God wasn't real, like, if he was a parent and you acted like that for 30 years, like, your brain still needs to process that even if it was an illusion the whole time, or
mhm.
even if it was your own brain talking to itself the whole time, like, there's still something to process there. So, yeah,
Yep.
there's lots of work needing to be done in deconstruction spaces, in secularism, and building up some tools and resources. I think, like, one of the greatest lies of atheism, uh, which I don't know if anyone said it like quite like this, but it's almost implied. There's this implication that if you just walk out of a religious building, you'll just like stumble upon your best life. Like, just walk out of the building, like, you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
You're fine. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Just
Mm,
ignore everything that came before, and it'll just,
yeah, and do
like,
everything that
a
humans have been doing,
secular
but like,
revelation. Yeah.
yeah, but with no cognitive technologies that we have co-evolved with, like,
Right.
just be totally different than the way that human nature has developed. And it's like, okay,
Mhm.
good luck with that.
Yeah, no. Yeah, well, you'll certainly need luck because nothing else is gonna be there for it. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, okay. So, and it kind of just wrapping up, because this part in particular, like, what do you, in the spirit of, like, what that journey is continuing with, particularly the clients you work with, what do you find to be some of the most helpful tools for them moving, whether or not you frame it in the, pessimism to the optimism, or from the, acknowledging the journey that they're still on? What have you have found to be most helpful?
Yeah, one of the first anchors that I work with for nihilists, especially ones that are really skeptical and philosophical and nothing is true and we don't have free will, like, if you're really analytical in that space, one of the first things we work with is core values. And the reason that
Mhm.
that's such a fantastic place for me to start, I'm sure you have lots of examples of this in your work, but the reason that it's such a good place to start is because we don't choose our core values. And so if you are drowning in, too much existential freedom where it's just chaos and you just don't even know where to start and it's overwhelming. Core values can be a really great anchor because it requires no belief. It doesn't actually also require you to choose anything. For
Mhm.
whatever reason, whether or not there's a God, whether or not you're an evolutionary primate, whatever it is, for whatever reason, certain values just in your body and in your experience mean more than other values just by being a human and walking out the door. That's already happening. That's already there. And so that can give us a place to start because then we're not too overwhelmed with having to know what ultimate reality is. We can just kind of table that for the time being. And also you don't have to choose anything because choice is really hard when you're in this like there's no free will philosophical
Mhm.
space. And you can just notice, it seems to me that like authenticity or honesty or truth seeking or loyalty, just like if it's a I can feel it in my body. It's a core value of mine, and when those things are violated, I'm really bothered by them. Like I'm really bothered with injustice, or I'm really bothered by people who have a lack of compassion. And so what that can do is like, okay, that's an anchor that we can build on that
Mhm.
required no choice and required no belief. It's just there. Okay, let's start building from there. So then like what are some ways that we can have like a ritual to just give your brain something, and this is great for brains and nihilism, because when we have something that we know is happening, like a ritual where like no matter what happens I'm going to go to church on Sunday, your brain kind of interprets that as I'm so safe that I know what's happening, and your brain just like
Mhm.
that's really good. So then like what's a ritual that really allows you to connect with yourself, that gives you that space of either awareness or reminding you of what's important. And then some people will say, like, oh, it's like a walk at sunset, or it's like this podcast that I really love, or it's, whatever it is. And like, okay, let's make sure we do this once a week. And so we slowly start building, not from top down, but from bottom up,
Mhm.
core values, things that matter to your experience, ways that you naturally connect, ways that you feel drawn to, reduce suffering. Let's build from the bottom up and start seeing if we can get some momentum going in the other direction, because the dangerous part of nihilism is if your nihilistic philosophy, pessimistic nihilistic philosophy is fueling your depression, and your depression is also making your nihilism worse. That's the downward spiral that is quite dangerous and leads to
Mhm.
suicidality. Certainly that was the case for me. And so what we want to do is we actually want to go the other direction. And hopefully, they have access to also some tools for depression. I'm not a therapist, so I can only send them in that way. But yeah, like to get, okay, like little bit more meaning and purpose, little bit more of an authentic life, little bit more of those rituals that psychologically help your brain, little bit more of like, how can I live according to my core values and how I want to experience this world. And if we can go in that direction and add those depression things like the walk and the sunshine and the friends and the meaningful work, if we can add those things, then we actually like get the spiral in the other direction where your depression improves, your nihilism improves, your depression improves. So really it's just like a bottom up process. And for a lot of people, we just start with core values and then we just start
Mhm.
building from there. How is that similar to like how you approach things, or different? Yeah, similar or
No,
different.
it is almost identical.
Hmm.
And
That's validating. Whenever a
it
therapist
really no,
validates
I mean,
me, it feels so good because I'm not a therapist and I have to be really careful to like just stay in the very limited scope that I studied in. So whenever a therapist like gives me validation, it feels so good.
yeah. Well, I mean, so this is where, and I'm not going to go down my too much of my problems with modern therapy, but
Mm,
it's in my perhaps not so humble opinion, what the work you're doing, what you just described, is the best of what we would call therapy. And it's
mm,
one of the criticisms that I have is that really, as far as the APA, American Psychological Association, the ACA are concerned, what is therapy to them? Therapy is just that which happens between a
mm,
licensed therapist and their client.
mm,
They have almost no definition beyond, it's solipsistic. It's just, well, what's therapist? Whatever
Yeah.
happens here. Well,
I
what's
think
going on? Well,
do you
that's
think
therapist.
I have a question for you there. Do you think some
Yeah.
of that is because, like, in order to really say what therapy is or should be, you have to go down a level into philosophy. And then if you don't
Yes.
go down to that level, it's just gonna be like symptom naming and symptom
Hmm.
management without
Yep.
dropping to that that deep philosophical level. Because the
100%.
therapists that wanna talk to me, which was a surprise for me, I was like, "Why does any therapist
Hmm.
wanna talk to me?" I just like, I have a degree in theology. I have a 18-month spiritual direction program. Like, no therapist should be talking to me. But what I
Yeah.
found is they were struggling with like the philosophies underneath the work that they were doing, and they wanted some
Hmm.
more philosophical depth in what they were doing in therapy so that they could understand people who had very different philosophical approaches to life. Like, if you've never
Yep.
considered nihilism as a philosophy or absurdism as a philosophy, it may be difficult, for you to meet your client where they are. So I'd never tell a therapist how to do therapy. That's outside my scope. But there has been times where I'll work with therapists as a client to just deepen their understanding of philosophy. And I've learned that some of that gap is missing in their training, which is fine. Like, you're not a philosopher, that's fine. But it almost seems like you're missing some depth by not going there. Is that
It's
something
been
you
a
would agree
criticism
with?
since I completed my first
Mm,
master's in counseling. There,
mm,
there, there is no psych program out there that heavily goes into philosophy. In fact,
mm,
the predominant idea is, well, they all just kind of have the same outcomes. So pick whatever modality you want and run with it.
mm,
One, not true. But two, it is a denial of the differences that exist
mm,
in how a person creates meaning, and the philosophical assumptions that, for instance, like, we talked about it a little earlier, affect, emotion, comes
mm.
first. Thought is a basically post hoc rationalization. We're just
Right.
making up
Hmm.
what our brains already
Yeah.
figured out.
Right.
CBT
Mm,
flips that on its head and says, don't worry, you can replace your thoughts. And every time it comes up with clients, I'm like, that's literally not possible outside of brain damage. I'm not advocating
mm,
that as a therapeutic modality. So, it's your brain doesn't get rid of stuff. It is guessing what can possibly work given what it is aware of. And it's trying new things out all the time. And so that philosophical basis, that recognition that we can go deeper, as far as I'm concerned, is exactly what every client needs, whether or not you call it therapy, coaching, or whatever else. That's what is missing. And
mm.
when you labelize it away, totally making up a word, but then
Words
you're
aren't real. They're all
dismissing,
made
right,
up.
exactly, yeah, it's
Right?
all whatever.
Uh,
You're dismissing the real suffering that the person is going through,
right.
because
And
in
yeah.
giving them a lie as well of, well, if I just know what this is, then I will know what to do with it. And it's like, no, this doesn't actually solve anything. You've put yourself into a box that never existed and only curtails, or rather, to use some of what we've already talked about, actually, is you've given yourself a structure that is far too limiting for your
Mm,
humanity to breathe.
I see. I see. Yeah, that really goes with my experience in therapy. So I've been to therapists for other things that have been helpful.
Okay.
But when I went to therapy when I was in pretty severe pessimistic nihilism and suicidality, um, really, really struggled with therapy. I tried 3 different therapists and just quit because, like, they just couldn't really understand what I was saying, and that was really difficult for me. And so, for example, like I would often I'd get diagnosed with depression, of course, and I was depressed. And so I would get things like, okay, let's make sure we get some sunshine this week, and let's
Mhm.
just make a goal to go on a walk or whatever it is. And in my nihilism, I hear that in my philosophical framework as the purpose of life is just to do the evolutionary things that give you a dopamine, like give you a chemical in your brain, and then you feel
Mhm.
a little bit better. What is the goddamn point? Like, okay, you go on a run and evolution rewards you with this little chemical in your brain that, like, hey, good job, you ran from the lion. I'm going to reward you with feeling a little happy for a little bit. And if that's what you're giving me as my prescription for depression, without understanding the philosophical problem that I'm having, that is that the meaning of life? Just to
Mhm.
evolutionarily try to give myself these little bursts of chemicals for evolutionary reasons, that's not enough for me to be alive. I still if that's all that I'm gonna get out of life, like, I
Why
would just
bother?
rather be miserable because, why bother? What's the fucking
Mhm.
point? And when I would try to explain to therapists, philosophically where I was struggling, and was instead getting, "Try to reframe your thoughts," which felt like gaslighting myself.
Oh, yeah.
I really, really struggled with therapy.
Mhm.
Um and so I've learned, I didn't know this about therapy because, again, I'm not in this space. And so I've learned that there's a gap there just by talking to people and my own experiences. But yeah, there does seem to be a gap there that's really interesting, that I hope we continue to have conversations like this where we open up a broader spectrum of what it is to be a human, and some of that depth underneath kind of the symptom management.
Mhm. No, 100%. Well, and that's that's your experience there, or your example of well, go for a run, go out and get some sunshine. The It's not that those are bad things to do. We are
Right. Like I
still
do them
hairless
now.
apes. Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, I
But
do that now.
without the
But
structure.
without a philosophical framework for why I should
Yeah.
care about that, why I should care about what my experience is. It just
Mhm.
couldn't land. I couldn't
Right.
do that. But when I got
No.
the philosophical, and so for me, that upward spiral is when I got some more help with philosophical framing for meaninglessness, for existential fears, for nihilism and absurdism and existentialism. When I got more of that foundation, and then I add to it, which I did. I went to the gym
Uh-huh.
today and I did a 20-minute walk and all this. And when I
Mhm.
add that, then I was cooking. But I
Yep.
couldn't just do the tools without the philosophy, or else it just had no framework to attach onto.
Mhm. Yep. Well, and that's the work of the values that you spoke about. I do the exact same. I start with everybody that way and
Mm,
have a worksheet. Like, here's a values pyramid. There are
mm,
no wrong answers.
mhm,
These are indelible to human nature to care about things. We have given
mhm,
them labels. You describe them often as the cognitive flip side of our emotional judgments. And it's
mm,
like, why do you feel this? Well, because something matters to you. What is that thing? Oh, it's a
yeah,
value. Okay.
mm,
We're
yeah, let's go.
yin yang,
And the
whatever.
interesting
Yeah.
Yeah, what's so interesting to me is that, I can really, jive with, a psychologist, and we can be talking about the same thing, but for me, when I rebuilt my life, or I'm helping someone rebuild, a client rebuild, I'm not doing it through psychology tools because I
Hmm.
didn't take those classes. I didn't have that education. I got there by studying religion, right? And so
Hmm.
the path that I do, that I kind of figured out through spiritual direction and learning about religion and my own life and whatever, that path that I ended up kind of finding helps me and helps people, is one that you found too. But I didn't use psychology. I just used religion. And so it's
Mm.
really interesting. To me, that's what's so fascinating about religion, is that I may not tell people that I'm doing this because they'll have an allergy to this word. But in some ways, I'm helping people rebuild their own religion. What is the religion
Hmm.
of you? What are your
Yeah.
rituals? What are your beliefs? Who are your I have maybe over here, somewhere over here,
Hmm.
I have saints. Who are your saints? I have saints around me of do I believe that they're, in heaven? No.
No.
Do they bring out an aspect of me that they inspire me to, for some value?
Hmm.
Absolutely. And so in some ways, I'm helping people by rebuilding their own religion, which
Hmm.
actually is psychologically good for us because we co-evolved with it. And
Yep.
so, it's really interesting, yeah, when religion and psychology can end up in similar places, even though I took a completely, different path in just studying religion, that I ended up in psychology spaces, because some of these things are just really good for you.
Mhm. Well, that's where it's like, religion gave way or seeded the space for philosophy. And in many ways, psychology hitched a ride onto philosophy,
There's
but then almost seeks to deny it ever existed. It's like, oh no, we've we've burned the bridge behind us. Now we know what we need. And it's
mm.
like, no,
The interesting
you.
thing that I've seen yeah, the interesting thing I've seen in my lifetime, and maybe you can give me more context for this, is, like, I know kind of more, uh, in more early psychology, and that there was just an allergy to spirituality. Like, we're just not gonna
Mhm,
touch this thing. Like, this thing is bullshit. Like, we're not in the business of whatever spiritual people are doing, right? And I know that, like, it has its roots with some of that, like, resistance to spirituality. And then, like, once the science of spirituality kind of started to show, like, oh, like, meditation is good for you and things like that, then I saw in my lifetime where therapists got in a space where they can recommend you explore
mhm,
spirituality, but they don't know enough about like different spiritual paths or what may work for you for your personality type to be any help there. And so I kind
mhm,
of watched like in my lifetime therapists go from being pretty skeptical of spirituality to just saying like explore spirituality. I don't have any more to give you here. And would you say like is that perception happening? I feel like that happened in my lifetime.
oh, hands down. I mean,
Mm,
the history of mental health, in fact, I'm looking over one of my bookshelves. But one book that goes through like the history of how mental health therapy evolved into what it is and its roots in military. Its
mm,
roots in the almost this financial piece of going, psychiatry was trying to figure some stuff out, and but that was way too much education and time spent. They wanted to expand it, and so people needed people to talk with. And it really, and I'm definitely crunching a lot of information here, but but it is
yeah,
that
I would love to read that, so message me later
I
what
will
that book
definitely
is, because
message you. Yeah,
I need to, like, learn more about that
it's
timeline,
shocking when you go through just what made this happen and made
yeah,
this built the building blocks of what we now refer to as this absurdity of therapy speak being everywhere.
mm,
And I mean, I have a whole thing is, I add into it that you have this, as religion has diminished as a
mm,
labeled identity, not the
right,
beliefs. There
mm,
was a big heyday online recently around some Pew research coming out around people are leaving Christianity. And of course, there's some secularists who are like, that's right, we're winning. And I'm like, you have no idea what you're reading. Did you bother
mm,
looking at the fact that still 85% believe in a God, that believe in a
mm,
soul, believe like they haven't
right, right,
they've they've gotten rid of the label,
yeah,
but the
but there's
beliefs are
still
still there.
yeah, like, we're still doing astrology, trying to find some way
Hmm.
to, like, find some order in chaos
Yep.
or flipping tarot cards or whatever we're
Yep.
doing, like, yeah,
Yep.
and most people still aren't atheists even when they leave religion, and yeah.
Nope.
And then also it's not a win when, like, okay, you leave religion and, like, still the studies show that, like, your longevity is better in religion.
Hmm.
Like, it's
Yeah,
that's still there, and
because
other
of
things
everything
like
that
that.
comes along.
So it's like, calm down, secularists, like, we're a long ways away, I feel like, until we can just, like, claim a W there.
Right. When this it's the fantasy of a Star Trek future, but every time I hear some version of that, I remember there was a scene out of um the one, it was Patrick Stewart and it was the Borg, and and he goes to town just with the rifle beating on one of the Borg, robots, and uh, the person who was from the 20th century looks and goes, "Hmm, yeah, we've certainly evolved quite far."
Mm,
It was this recognition that you have just because technologically you are like a god
yeah,
has not given up your capacity for the need for one. Even
yeah,
if
uh-huh,
obviously we don't
yeah,
necessarily need to have all the baggage of,
right, and this is
authoritarianism
why
and everything come along.
yeah, I love that Nietzsche quote that, like, God is dead, and he talked about it in, like, a sad way, like, "Hey, I don't know if we're gonna survive this collectively," but he has this quote that, like, "We're gonna be looking for God in caves for thousands of years," and it's like, people aren't realizing because they aren't thinking like, "Oh, I have existential needs and fears, and so I'm gonna go do this," 'cause, most of this is, like feels like it's subconscious, but, uh yeah, like increasing in new age or making wellness a religion or
Hmm.
Comic-Con can be the place that you're really actually doing religion. In fact, you can now Jedi is a religion. They
Yep.
establish themselves as a religion to get tax exempt status. And or even like romantic relationships where you're looking for someone who's going to save you. It's like you're not
Hmm.
looking for a human, you're actually looking for a savior there, like to someone who treats you like a queen all the time and blah blah blah. Like that's not a human, that's a savior. And so it is interesting like that I'm more of the belief that our technology is crazy and like I grew up with no internet and so anytime I have to learn a new thing it's like oh my god so the technology is crazy but it feels to me like human nature really has quite stayed the same and so we're still paleolithic in so many ways, you know.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
when you study old religions, when you study history, I just see people who are just like me. They don't have the technology, but like what's driving them is the same.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's very connective for me. But yeah, it's interesting.
We we will never lose sight of our need to belong. You know,
Mm,
Daniel Siegel. I've gone through a evolution of how much I agree with him, but there's still a lot of great kernels there of interpersonal neurobiology and attachment science, and but he has this notion of that he calls the me that is we, or we,
yeah. Yeah.
and
Uh huh.
which it's not like, and in his honest moments he definitely admits that he's totally taken this from a lot of eastern religions, and and all of this he's like,
Yeah.
we have
Like
not
mystics have been saying this for thousands of
for
years, and yeah, the
millennia,
whole deal, right?
right? Yeah. So, and it's that is that uh the idea that we are, that, and now we're coming almost full circle, I think, from where we started, and that is that recognition that we're not billiard balls, as if
Mm,
we can just make stuff up without reference to the shared humanity that we are embedded
yeah.
within.
And also
And
like experience, you know, to talk
right.
about us like we're just these logical robots that know what we believe and know why.
Hmm.
It's almost based in this old materialism that science itself is challenging. Like we have
Hmm.
really solid, like very secular, very atheist, very non-religious scientists who are studying consciousness
Hmm.
and really losing their grounding in materialism and starting to go into panpsychist places or other places
Hmm.
because consciousness is so mysterious and we're trying to make sense of it. And so it's almost like, yeah, we're standing too on this like old materialism that we were so sure of maybe 200 years ago that now science itself is questioning. And so like we have to update with that.
Yep.
Um, yeah, yeah, rather than just think
Throw out
that
the reductionism.
right, and it's like, no, like, experience matters. There's an experiential quality to being alive,
Mhm.
and that really saved me in nihilism. That was my turning point in nihilism, and we
Mm.
can wrap up here, but this may
Yeah.
be helpful for someone, but when I was in the mental space of, like, there is no point in being alive. Like, this earth is gonna blow up. No one's gonna know that we're here. Anything that I do will be forgotten in 3 generations. All be forgotten. What is the goddamn point? And then my kid, because I had one kid then, got off the bus, looked for my face, saw my face, lit up in his face and his whole body, and ran to me and gave me a hug. And there was something in that moment where my brain, my rationality had no sense of how to make meaning in this universe, but my
Mhm.
but my body, my experience, the experience of what it was to be an experiencing thing in that moment was screaming at me, "Oh my god, this is so meaningful." And I didn't
Mhm.
know how to make sense of it yet. But yeah, there is, like, building from the point of view of experience really saved my life in a lot of ways, because it took me out of that brain space of having to figure out how to make meaning in a universe that doesn't seem to care about us. And it brought me back into what is worth experiencing as an experiencing thing anyway, because it's pretty cool that, like, the lights are on at all. And, like, let's explore that. Like, what makes your body light up? Like, I've loved this conversation. An hour and a half flew by like it was nothing, right? This is play for me. Like, and so when
Mhm.
I was exploring what makes, experience worth having, it was really life changing for me.
Love it.
But so simple
Uh,
to other people. For secular people,
yeah.
it was like, "Yeah, you're just alive, just live."
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Just live.
"I was raised Mormon, let me get there, okay?"
Like,
I like,
I need
my
to do a little
religious
more work.
brain is like, find the truth, then know how to
Uh-huh.
pattern your life. So I spent my entire adult life looking for truth so I could know how to pattern my life. It took me a
Yeah.
while to get out of that religious brain pattern that I had from religion, even if I stopped being Mormon a long time ago. And so, like, yeah, secular people, like, I understand that that's intuitive to you, that you're alive and just live. But that was not intuitive for me coming from religion, especially Western religion, which starts out with, you need to know it's true. And if you know it's
Mhm.
true, if you find the story that's true, you'll know how to pattern your life. And I kept doing that after religion. And that's where I got really stuck.
Well, speaking as someone who has continued to expand into secular circles and has plenty of clients who are have been out of, it's not that easy either for them. I mean, they may
Mm,
say just this, but they don't. Now we come back to that, the
mm,
philosophical background of going, you're saying this, but what does it actually mean when you're doing it?
mm.
Big fat question mark.
Yeah.
And there's
Do you
not any shame
find
there.
Yeah, I have a question for you. Do you find with
Mm,
your clients, and then we can wrap up here.
yeah.
But do you find with your clients, with my religious clients, they tend to be better at naming what they're missing. Like, if they
Hmm.
come from Mormonism, for example, I really miss community. My kid is turning 12. I want to, like, I feel like we should do something, but I don't know what to do. I miss waking up in the morning and feel like I know what I'm doing, or I know what I'm about. Like, they can kind of name what they miss because they had it in religion.
Hmm.
And what I find with secular people who come to talk to me is they'll sign up for a coaching session because, a video resonated with them, but they don't really know what they're looking for. And they
Hmm.
don't really know how to explain what they're looking for. And they're just kind of feel kind of empty, and they're just kind of checking me out a little bit. But it takes me a little bit longer sometimes with secular clients to get to what it is that's making you feel a little empty and just feeling a
Yeah.
little blah. And sometimes they just show up and say, "I just kind of feel blah." And I was like, "Okay," and we
Hmm.
have to take some time to get to the blahness. But with religious people, I find that they can sometimes be better with saying, like, I don't know what to do, like, around Christmas time because I used to do XYZ and I really miss that. They can, like, name the thing that they're missing, that they're mourning, that they need help rebuilding. Do you find that for you also?
Completely. And
Mm,
even in particular with the people who are in therapy will have a reticence to bring up their religious background.
hmm,
And when they find out that regardless of whatever my own background is, that that's still a topic we can discuss,
hmm.
suddenly the blahs become easier to identify
Oh,
because
yeah,
they
I like
have
that.
that language shared to be able to take stock of that and come in and go, right. So just like, regardless of what it
Right.
really is, because I love studying religion broadly. So it's like
Yeah.
whatever your tradition happens to be, let's
Yeah.
have that conversation.
Yeah.
And suddenly then it's like, oh, all of a sudden I find this a lot easier to talk about. Like, yep, right.
Yeah,
Like
because
it's okay.
we have we have some language there, we have something to
Hmm.
work with. The worst therapist I had was at the time I was grieving Mormonism.
Mm,
For me personally, felt like I was in a place where I knew it wasn't true. Couldn't go back, had no desire to go back. Was explaining this to my therapist, and the therapist just said, "Well, yeah, it's a cult, and you just, be happy that you're out of the cult." And I did go back to him another time because even if you take the bite model and say that Mormonism is
mm,
on the high end of the cult spectrum, like fine, like we can have that conversation. But me in that moment, I didn't need to hear, "You're just in a cult and now you're out of it.
right.
Yay." You missed that I was mourning something, that I was missing
Hmm.
something. And I never went back to that therapist because he missed it by just,
Hmm.
like, calling it a cult, by having no understanding of religion or the religious brain or what I could possibly be going through, and how I could be in a place where I know Mormonism's not true, but I'm still missing it in some ways, and my identity's, all over the place. And yeah, so I didn't go back to that therapist. He just said, "Be glad you're not in that cult." And I was like, "That's not helping me."
It
Even
is
if that was
not.
true, it's not helping me.
No, no. Well, no. And we could go on. I think
Yeah.
we've tried to establish this several times, but it's like you. Uh, I just deeply this has been great.
This is fantastic. We
And
spiral, like, it's fun that, like, we talk about human development with spirals and, like, we kept returning to things, which is that's
mhm.
fantastic.
Oh
Our
yes.
even our conversation was a spiral. That was lovely.
When you bring that up, in fact, one of the best therapy experiences I ever had personally was with an art therapist who
Mm,
used the spiral
mm,
as a mechanism for development. And that
yeah.
was
I've seen similar I've done
15
s
years ago, and it's still stuck with me.
I think I've done some similar work with, like, labyrinths. Do you do spiral
Mm.
work with
Hmm.
labyrinths?
Yep.
I'd imagine it'd be similar, but yeah,
Yeah. We we love our, well, symbolism. We haven't removed ourselves from
Yep,
religious needs. We just
yep.
are
I
figuring
just
out
have,
different
like,
ways of
yeah,
doing it.
like, I just have a wall of, like, other saints and other symbols
Yep.
that
Oh
speak
well.
to me more now, so
I have fun with Marvel characters and comic books because I mean, in many ways, they are a modern day mythology.
I
So
feel really
it's
sad. I'm
yeah.
really jealous of Marvel people because you have like so many movies and so many fun things. Like I'm a super Star Wars nerd and I'm a Lord of the
Mm,
Rings nerd. And for
hmm.
whatever reason, like I don't believe in free will. So for whatever reason, my nerdiness like stopped at Marvel. And
Oh,
I am sad about that because like it seems like a really fun community. It seems like a really fun universe. You guys have a movie every other weekend, which seems fun for you
practically.
guys.
Yeah.
But I couldn't get there, but I'm jealous. I'm jealous of the Marvel people for whatever reason. My nerdiness didn't get there.
Well, I will still happily nerd out over Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and so
Fantastic.
on. So you are still you're still part of us. So we're
Oh, that's great.
welcome. Yeah.
All right,
Awesome.
such a lovely
Well,
conversation. I gotta go
yeah,
put kids to bed, but this was so fantastic.
sounds good. No, thank you very much.